The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody who's watching this live. Today is Tuesday, February the 25th. We are a couple of days away from the first Ontario District event that's taking place in Oshawa at Durham College. We hope everybody can come out and watch us there, even if you're not competing. It'll be a great thing. We're looking forward to it. We usually have a tremendous number of volunteers for that one, and lots of spectators from the GTA and beyond come to watch that. Also, welcome to everybody who's watching this on our YouTube channel. So that's just a reminder that this is being recorded right now, and it'll be posted to the YouTube channel once this slideshow concludes tonight. If you do have any questions, please post them in the question box and we'll get to them as we go along the way. We will send out a link to the YouTube channel and to any links that are mentioned on the webinar after the broadcast has concluded. So there's a few news items that we want to get to quickly, and then we're going to have Team 1305 Ice Cubed from North Bay provide us with some pit tips, and then we have Team 1325 Inverse Paradox, and we're going to talk about robot inspection, which is very important because it's the first thing that happens when you get to the event. Just a reminder, and this is kind of timely because I had some interactions today with some members of Team 1305, including some mentors who did their silver badge. So there's a safety badge program. Earlier this week, we went over 16,000 quizzes taken for the first 3 years of this. Yeah. Some people may have had to do the quiz multiple times to get the 100% that's required on the 30 random questions from over 100 questions that are there. And you can pick up your badge at your district event. And this year we introduced some qualifications for the silver badge, and you can contact me if you haven't seen the posts about that. But essentially, if you have a first aid certification and a bronze badge already, or your team, some team members on your team entered the safety animation competition that FIRST has, you can earn a silver badge. So, and there's other opportunities. So if you're not sure, please contact me, and my email will be at the end of the slideshow, so you can contact me later on if you have any questions. If you're new to us in Ontario, is the First Tech Challenge. We had our championship the day after this year's East Provincial FLO Championships. But if you go to that link, you can find out more about Jumpstart, which is a way to get started on FTC this year before the new season starts in the summer. So that's I think we're going to have a tremendous numbers of teams doing that. And next year, in addition to our provincial championships, we're going to have some qualification events as well. Just a reminder from Mr. Hobbins, the regional director for FRC, that at every event we give away the carpet. Usually it's cut up into pieces so that it can fit into vehicles. If you're interested in getting the carpet for your school or your team, if you're a community team like the two teams we have today, then please contact Mr. Hobbins at the email address shown there. So once again, we have we have 3 experts today. So the first 2 experts are from Team 1305, Ice Cubed. It's a community, it's a hub. If you don't know what a hub is, a hub provides support to teams throughout the province. It's also a community team that represents all of North Bay. I'm assuming that this means that you've won 7 Chairman's Awards, Nancy. Is that right?
Yeah.
And and 17 Blue Banners. So with us today is the person that started Robotics in North Bay, Nancy Dewar-Stenning, and with her is the chairman's presenter and last year's captain, Colton Chaput. Is that how you pronounce it, Colton?
Chaput, yeah.
Okay, so it's like a French name. Yep.
Yes, he'll go by a lot of different names.
Okay,
He's pretty good about that.
that's good. So, without much further delay, we're going to be talking about FRC and in terms of
Go
their
into
new
the
5
next.
pit tips.
Okay, you've already done the introduction, so we can go right into what we're going to talk about. Some of the things might be pretty obvious, but if it's a rookie team, a pit is kind of a very unusual place at competition. We're going to talk about safety, your pit is your stage, judging, other notes, you can read those. And we can go on to the next slide, number 4. What is a pit? It's your workspace for robot repairs or programming. Each team defines how they're going to use their space, but this is how we use it. It's also your team judging space, a place to receive guests. We've been very fortunate in recruiting some sponsors right out of our pit by using some really good pit etiquette. Sometimes the teams use their components of their pit for outreach. So you see a picture here at the International Plowing Match, which, and you can see our pit. If you've ever seen our pit, you'll recognize components of it. We can flatten it right out to be a backdrop and move parts of it around. And 4069 was there, and 2702 from Kitchener, and we had friends from Bracebridge and North York, Sturgeon Falls and North Bay Lego teams. So your pit can serve multiple uses. We'll go to the next one. Your pit is your stage, and all are welcome there. Now, this is our team philosophy. This isn't what First says we have to do, but we found that this is an effective way to do things. And you know what? I took this slide from Colton, so I'm going to give it to him now.
So what's really important to remember is that when you're in the pits, there's always lots of people walking around. There could be other robotics team members, mentors. There could be sponsors of either the event or teams that are coming to look for maybe more sponsorship opportunities, and also members of the public who are looking to get interested or who are interested in the program. So a few important things to remember is that you should always face your audience. If you can avoid it, you should not have your back to the aisle in front of your pit, because this gives kind of people a sense that you're open and you're there to talk to, you're open to talking to them. And if they're looking for someone to ask questions, then they can already see you're the person to talk to. You should also share your stage. So there's other people on your team, and I'm sure they would also enjoy having the opportunity to talk to those people as well. You can always use your smile and facial expressions to invite the people into your pit. Even a smile or a wave, hello, how are you doing, can get people to come talk to you when they might feel uncomfortable just to start a conversation off like that. So you've already done the first part for them. And the last tip would be to make all your guests feel welcome in your pit. And if you look in the picture here, this is a picture of our team from last year's North Bay FRC event, and it's taken with 2 presidents. We've got Mike Gagne, the president of Nipissing University, where our FRC event is held, and Don Bosey, who was the president of First.
I have a question.
And yes.
Yep.
Why do you have a hockey sweater in your pit?
That's a good question, and it's hanging there so you'll ask.
Yeah.
Ah.
So that is the jersey of our local Ontario Hockey League team, the North Bay Battalion. We've done on a few occasions, we've done puck drops with them, and we've had kind of an ongoing partnership with the team. And we actually had we have a jersey that has our team number on the arm. You can just kind of see the 05 on it, and on the back as well, it says 1305.
So everything in your pit has a story. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the main idea for our pit, is that there's always different things to talk about. If you look on the walls, there's lots of pictures. a few kind of words here and there. And that way, if we're talking to someone about something and we want to show them what we're talking about, we can reference the pictures that are hanging up in our pit.
And Colton, if I might add, you can see there's a row of photographs across the top there. Those are past captains. So Colton will be on that captain's gallery this year as last year's captain. And so we keep their stories going and we follow their progress. So if you need to use an example of impact, you can always go to a captain and say, oh, well, this one here is an aerospace engineer. This one's a game designer, you know. So we find that quite helpful. Oh, and I'd like to say that 1325 has a lovely pit presence. They're often near us and they're the same color and everything. And they show a lot of personality. I like that.
Another important component to think about in the pit is safety. So you should always be thinking about how you can be safe. So a few things that you should always do is the safety captain should be in the pit and ensure that everyone is being safe and that everyone is doing okay, checking in on everybody. Shout out, this is actually in the picture, it's Sebastian from MaxTech 4343, who won the Safety Star of the Day at one of their competitions and also one that we attended with them as well. So a few tips for how to keep your pit a safe space for in case something ever happened. Make sure you have a first aid kit, a battery spill kit as well, and a fire extinguisher, and they should all be easily accessible. And sometimes it's a good idea to have even a map to show where those things are, or even just to have them plainly like in sight where someone can see if they ever just came into your pit and were looking for those things. It's important to maintain a clean working space so you're not tripping over things, or and even it's just good for when you're working on your robot, it's easier to find stuff and that kind of thing. And make sure there's room to get around the pit and move freely around there.
I'd also add, Colton, that that's how we do it, and that's how we see successful teams and veteran teams do those kinds of things, not necessarily required by FIRST.
Yeah. Now some of the things that are required by FIRST, if you check, the next slide is talking about safety, and if you check the event rules manual, it defines the pit as it's usually 10 feet by 10 feet by 10 feet, but it can be smaller. I think sometimes if they run out of space, it can be 8 feet even. So that's something you can check with the event organizers to see how much room you will have. Some of the other things, the pits will be unavailable if they're closed. So at the end of the day, when the pits are closed, you aren't allowed in to access your things. So make sure you grab everything on the way out that you will need. Make sure you stay in your assigned pit space. When you get to the event, they've chosen a spot for you. And usually there'll be some tape marks to show you where you're supposed to be. So it's important to make sure you don't have anything overlapping. Keep the aisles clear. There could be robots, there's people passing, it gets pretty busy. So make sure, again, your stuff is not leaving your pit. There should be no sparks, that would be a fire hazard. Nothing too big. Any floor standing power tools are prohibited. No brazing or welding. You can only solder with specific tools. All structures must be safe. You can't build any structure that will support people or items overhead. You wouldn't want that to fall on anybody. And make sure to secure team identification assets. So if you have a sign, a flag, or displays, make sure that they're securely mounted. Again, we don't want those falling on anybody.
Yeah, and I kind of like that size requirement. Most events, every year we get safety advisors say, oh, this team that's saying your pit is too tall. And we're always really pleased when they say that, because we know we're 2 inches under the 10 feet. So yeah. We're good. But they do check. We know that from experience.
So
Yeah.
we have one comment to add from one of the people watching, and that's Hinkle Young, who is the lead robot inspector for the province. And he says Pitted Mill will have a battery spill kit, and we'll try and get one for inspection. You should try to get a spill kit of your own. And if you do have a battery spill, you can leave the battery with Pitted Min, and First Canada has a process for disposal of the spilt or damaged battery.
Good point. The look of the pit, that's, I'm kind of artsy, and that's something that's near and dear to my heart. I really like a clean looking pit, but you should have your own look too. Practice setting up or laying out your pit prior to the event so it goes smoothly. Pit tables with the storage doors are great, but you don't have to have them. What you will be provided for the rookie teams, you will get a table. It's either 6 feet or 8 feet long. And we typically, veteran teams don't require a table. They come in with their own carts. And then if you don't need it, you can take that table out. But I love about a table is you can drape it with a cloth, plastic cloth or fabric cloth, and then you can hide all your messy stuff under there. Just be careful that the corners don't hang out and get caught in your robot. There are advantages to having pit walls and disadvantages. Ours will, they roll up. It takes a while, about 20 minutes on a good day to set it up. And it provides a place to show your stuff. And it also provides nice walls for your neighbor teams to use if they want to use them. So whenever anybody's next to us, we give them duct tape and let them put their things up. Show off your hardware in your pit, and some people will show off their hardware from many years, and sometimes they just use the current years. It's once again up to your team culture. Just manage the clutter. As soon as the robot gets out of the pit, and with 1305 situation, we have 2 or 3 people get in there and sweep and reorder things, put tools away, tidy up, and get it looking good. And it also, having less clutter means that people can see what you want them to see. Show your products and gifts from other teams. I think it's really important if a team goes to the trouble of giving you something that you do display it or wear their pin. And once again, the pit design is unique to each team.
And then if you look at the picture on the left,
oh, right, yeah.
Switch there, but that's a picture from last year at the Georgian College event, which is really cool because they have a walking track around up top. So we were able to get up there and take a picture of the inside of our pit. So if you kind of look around, you can see some of those, the carts we were talking about with the storage. So there's plenty of storage. There's actually 3 carts in this picture, and throughout, as well as a toolbox in there. But throughout the year, last year, we kind of changed things up a bit. We actually found that we only needed 1 of the back carts. So we changed it up, and we changed our look entirely last year, which is what you see there. But what's really cool, I think, about our pit is that a good idea, if you do decide to have pit walls, is to be considering what you want on them. So ours are actually kind of a felt, and then we have all of our posters are Velcro on the back, and then we just put them up, and then at the end of the event, we can just take them down and put them away. So this is just a list of some of the essential tools that you would need in the pit. Screws, nuts, washers, if you need to replace any of those things or add anything to your robot at the event, those are always a good idea. An assortment of screwdrivers, tape, all sorts of different tapes. Our team has a full drawer in the toolbox. A tape measure and ruler, work gloves, wrenches, Allen keys, crescent wrench, batteries and charger, as well as cutters, drill bit set, various hammers, pliers, and also it's a good idea to have a power outlet or a power strip so that you have enough outlets, although you want to avoid daisy chaining those extension cords.
And I think those are all the ones that are on First Inspires, right?
Yeah.
One of the things we like to add is an office supply bin, so markers, pens, pencils, tape, Scotch tape, things that other teams might want to borrow. Once again, 1325 is a veteran team too, and you become a go-to team. And it's good for the new teams to know that we have all that stuff to help them.
Next slide.
Who should be in the pit? Once again, it's totally up to the teams, but we find this effective. Many people believe that the pit should not be a hangout or a coat closet, but some pits are, we see that. And that's a place where people sit around and stuff. With our team, we have a policy where if you're tired and you need to sit down, then go and have a seat in the stands out with scouting, or if you need a break, go for a walk, but don't sit and lounge in the pit because that's a workspace. And it's also, we have a trade show feel to ours, so it's strictly business there. That's not required by First, it's just the way we do things. Here's a great picture of our friends, the Waffles, and they always have that smiling face in the pit. They like to see that. For us, the pit crew is there, the presenters, and so sometimes you have one set of presenters or two. You have people who specialize in the Robot Awards and people who specialize in Team Attributes Awards. Sometimes there's a great deal of crossover in there, especially with the older team members. Safety captain doesn't have to be right in the pit, but in the vicinity, and I think a good safety captain will also walk around and check out other pits. We recommend strongly that we have at least one mentor in the pit at all times, and usually two, one for the robot and one just, you know, a general skills mentor. And we say pit crew and drive team, and sometimes that's the exact same people. The student roles, well, the drive team, if they need to be working on the robot or doing some strategies, but only members who are needed for repairs. You programmer, but sometimes the programmer wants to go somewhere else. I think they typically like to be close to the robot. The pit presenters, they should keep a lookout for the judges and guests, sponsors, ambassadors. If you see VIPs coming around, it's super important that we recognize them, because if First is bringing a VIP around, there's a good reason for it. And here's our chance to support First and promote First. Many of these VIPs are sponsors of First Canada, and that's how we get our competitions and all our supplies and that kind of thing. The safety captain should focus on ensuring safety. Colton mentioned that, and wellness. Encourage hydration and visit other pits with that same message. The mentor roles in the pit. Perhaps the drive coach is a mentor. They would certainly have a role there, coaching on pit presenting, so that's a mentor job usually. They also support safety. Definitely mentors. When there is a judge in the pit, you want to vacate, because this is the students' time to speak to the judges, and the judges don't find us nearly as interesting as those amazing students. Sometimes, I'm sure this happens for you, Roland, that judges will approach you because you've been a mentor for a long time and they get to know us. We advise mentors to leave the pit to allow students to present with the judges. And if the Prime Minister shows up, bring in the whole team. That's the time when you break the rules. Now, I don't know that we've ever had a Prime Minister in a pit, but we've definitely had a Premier and ministers in our pit. And then we want to make sure we get group photos with them, and they love to do that too. And this is Chris Mara, who won a Prime Minister's Award for Education with Justin Trudeau. Colton.
Next slide. It's important to know your team's story. So study up on documentation. So for us, anyways, our team, as veteran team, we like to keep documentation from all years. One of the ways we do that is our annual chronicle. That's just one thing our team does. That's not a requirement by First. But if you do submit for any awards, some of the documentation you will have is the business plan, essays for the Chairman's Award, as well as you might have some information on the teams you have helped or assisted. So those are always, it's always interesting to see a bit about where your team, how your team started, or who you've helped over the years. If you're a student in the pit, you should know kind of the basics of the robot design. I don't think it's expected that everyone be an expert programmer and understand how all the programming works, but it's important that you at least kind of understand how your strategy and how your robot is working to accomplish the tasks that you want it to do. And if you don't know the answer, you should be honest and just say, actually, I'm not quite sure that answer, but this person would know a bit more about that. And that's a good way to pass the question over to someone else rather than invent the facts, because you don't want to lie to anybody. You want to make sure they get the answers they're looking for. So if you know someone would be better suited for the question, and even if you know a bit about it, you can say, yeah, well, if it's about outreach, say, for example, if I was talking about the international plowing match for our team, I would say, well, the international plowing match was a week-long event, and we had other teams join us. I actually didn't, I wasn't able to attend, but I could direct them to someone else who was there, and they could talk a bit about their experience. And it's important to remember the little stories. So if you were at an event and something funny or cool happened, share those moments, because then that might be something I want to hear. And yeah, those are important moments. And if you look at the picture over here, this was in 2004. So to put that into perspective, I was born in 2003. So these people, I wasn't on the team then, obviously.
You were quite walking.
Wasn't quite walking up, and
it was our rookie year.
Yeah, I can tell you that I can recognize some of these people. Either they've come back to check out our team, or they're currently hanging in our pit in the captain's gallery, or I've just heard about them from some of our amazing mentors.
Aww. Thank you. All right, next one.
How to start a conversation in the pit. So the important things to remember: eye contact, a smile or a nod to anyone passing by in the aisle. It makes it look like you're a friendly and inviting person. It makes them feel welcome, and they're more likely to come talk to you. And you can even take it one step further and start that conversation for them, and then they might feel a little more comfortable, or they won't want to come talk to you about what they would like to ask, or because you never know, they might be thinking, oh, how did they do that? But they're too shy to ask, or maybe they just think you're too busy. So some of the things you can ask is, hey, how are you enjoying the competition? You can ask them if they're with a team and which team. If you know they're from a team, or as a follow-up question, you can ask how their robot is doing. And a really good way to get a conversation started with anybody really is, would you like a button? So if your team has any buttons made up and you have them on hand, you can ask if they'd like one, and then you can talk a bit about your team while you're giving them that button. And you can offer to give them a tour of your pit or your robot.
Once again, it's not a requirement at first by any means, but we just find it makes more fun. Students practice their public speaking skills, and the visitors to first have more fun.
Next slide. So pit judging. At competition, there are judges there to see what every team is doing and to consider you for different awards. So a few tips on how to talk to the judges when they do come by and visit you in your pit. When you see them, say hello, introduce yourself, and it's okay to ask what they're judging, because each judge is usually looking for certain things, and that way you kind of know what you're talking about. It's happened to our team where we've had a few people and they think that they ask a question maybe about the robot just to get the conversation started, but they actually wanted to know about our outreach. So if you ask them what they're judging, then you can give them a bit more details on what they're looking for. It's important to make eye contact and smile. Have prompts like your business plan or even pictures, different documentation about your team. Your robot, if it's in the pit, you can always use that as kind of a prop and point to different things and explain what's going on. Only if those in the conversation are working on the robot should be in the pit when the judges visit. So if your pit is really crowded when the judges are around, maybe make a bit of room so they can either get out of the aisle or at least just not have too many people trying to talk to them, because it can get a little confusing. And that goes again with something we talked about earlier. If there are too many mentors in the pit, or if there's mentors, then they can go kind of take a walk around and come back, give the students a chance to talk to the judge. And if you look in this picture, we've actually got a few older students, but we've also got a grade 9 on the closer to this side of the picture, and that's just kind of to give him an idea on how to talk to judges, and then that way if he feels comfortable he can chime in. Next slide. A few other notes would be to take pictures of the visitors that come to your pit. This is us visiting another pit, but in a previous slide we had a picture of some people that stopped by our pit. You should have sponsor information ready for potential sponsors who are impressed with your team. Sometimes people come check out the competition to see what it's about and see if they're interested in sponsoring. And then if they do talk about it, then you have that stuff on hand. For us, it would be we could give them a sponsor letter to give them even more information if we haven't covered some stuff. Make your pit fun. Make sure there's someone in your pit over lunch. I know that that's usually when a lot of teams go to lunch, but it's important to have someone there in case someone stops by, or even sometimes you need to work on some stuff at lunch. Make sure people can see your robot, so kind of keep that front open, and then that kind of draws them in because they want to see more of what's going on. And some perks of having a welcoming pit, so using these tips can get you awards, sponsors, it can get more teams to come visit you and you can meet them, and it's also a very good way to make friends on other teams.
All right, so I'm sure that folks have other ideas. Roland, if you're listening in still, we'd welcome your comments or questions, or anyone. Paul?
I just want to make one point that First Canada would really like to emphasize, and that is that you see these two young men in the picture wearing their safety glasses. You should be carrying your safety glasses with you. We do not want to see teams show up to go into the pits where no one has safety glasses because they're in the pits. No, you should have them with you. And the glasses that we loan out are for guests and visitors and sponsors and VIPs. They're not meant for teams. You need to have your own properly fitting safety glasses, especially if you're working on a robot. Other than that, fantastic presentation, Nancy and Colton. It covers a lot of the stuff, but as we always say, read the rules, read the manuals. You'll find more other interesting things in there.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and just basically second everything that Nancy and Colton said. I really appreciate the fact that you guys shouted us out a couple times. You guys have probably the best pit presence in the entire district. So to get compliments from you, that's quite good. I mean, if everyone could aspire to have a pit like 1305, I think we'd have a beautiful looking competition.
Thank you, Roland.
So thanks again, Colton and Nancy. That was great.
You're very welcome.
So now we're going to head over to Roland. You see a beautiful picture of Roland wearing his robot hat, the hat he wears at Robotics. I have a feeling you have more than one row of those, Roland. Again, sorry.
Yes, sorry. No, I go through about one a season, I think, by the time I wear one out usually. So
you can see, just as 1305 had some very impressive qualifications, so does Team 1325. Again, you'll notice they were started in the same year, which kind of indicates why the numbers are so close. They've got also several Chairman's Awards and several Blue Banners, and Roland, as it says here, has won a Woody Flowers Award. Roland, I didn't put this slide together with Sarah Sills, who usually does this, but what does it mean there when it says Skywatch?
that's when I'm not doing robotics, I co-founded a company called Skywatch, and we've been in business now for over 5.5 years. So yeah, I run my own business as well as mentor a first robotics team. So I think the only time I have left after that is sleep.
That sounds very familiar. Anyways, I'm going to switch screens now to get yours. There we go. So you should see your slides, Roland, yes?
Yeah, I see them. Thank you.
Okay. Now I'm just going to run them with. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say I tried to run this afternoon, and it wouldn't do the presentation. So I'm just going to go slide by slide over here from the left, so you can see them.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah, that's fine. Should be fine. All right. Well, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide since Paul did such a great introduction. Just before I get really started, though, I've been suffering from a cold for the past couple of days. So if halfway through the presentation I start coughing up a lung, I'll try to mute myself and get through it, and then we'll get through this presentation. So yes, I've been involved in FIRST now since 2003. 9 seasons on 1325. I mean, when I put that stat together, I couldn't believe it. But anyway, and then yes, I was honored to win a Woody Flowers Finalist Award in 2016. Next slide. So what we're going to talk about today is robot inspection. Now, I'm by no means an expert. Yeah, even though this is an Ask the Expert webinar, I've just been through a lot of them, right? I've on the mentor side, have been on the receiving end of a lot of inspections. Some went well, some didn't. But then I've also developed a deep respect for the person on the other side, and that's the robot inspector. They have a tough job to do, and they really have your best interests at heart, believe it or not, in spite of the fact that they may cause you all kinds of grief. But I'll get into that a little more. So I am going to talk about robot inspection. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm not going to cover every area in great detail, but I am going to focus on bumpers and the cost accounting worksheet, which were 2 things that Sarah did ask me to focus on. So that's what I focused my presentation on. Next slide. All right, so we're going to talk about robot inspection. Next slide. So as I kind of alluded to previously, robot inspection is full of good intentions, in spite of the fact that it's a very contentious process, or can be, if you don't have the right attitude. And yeah, I'm going to talk a lot about bits and bytes and what you need to do with your robot to make sure that you pass inspection. But a lot of this comes down to how you approach it. Okay, believe it or not, the robot inspectors do want you on the field, and they do want you competing. They want you to be there, right? They're not there to make a total mess of 2 months of really hard work. They understand that you've worked really hard to do this, right? But at the same time, they also have to balance what the rules are, in order to help make the competition fair and to keep your team and the other teams and the spectators safe. And to do that, you need to conform basically to Chapter 9 of the rules. Chapter 9 of the rules are the robot rules. 36 wonderful pages of all kinds of inordinate detail about what your robot can and cannot have. And I'm going to go into some detail on the next slide, if I could bring that up, please. So the main points of inspection. Now, inspection happens when you load in. District event, you load in Friday, late Friday afternoon, 3, 4 o'clock, depending on the event. And inspection basically happens right through until the pits close, usually around 8 o'clock. And the main goal of the robot inspectors is to make sure that everybody passes inspection by the time pits close on that first day. So it's a really, really busy time for the inspectors. And it's a really, really busy time for the teams too, because they want to get through inspection quickly so that they can get on the field and practice. So the main points that they go after, the first thing is you take your robot over to the inspection station and you get it measured and you get it weighed, right? The size, the weight, it's 125 pounds, perimeter, 120-inch perimeter. I think it's 45-inch high this year. And then new this year, because there's no bag, you also have a 150-pound limit for any add-on pieces. So in other words, your robot weight plus your add-on pieces can't be more than 150 pounds. And that's new this year because there's no bag. You're allowed to kind of have different components, so your robot can be kind of multi-configurable through the event, but all your configurations need to be inspected. So that's new this year. So be aware of that. Your bumpers also have to be inspected, and I'm going to get into detail later about the bumpers. The mechanical, there isn't, believe it or not, there isn't a lot to the mechanical inspection. Basically, just making sure that there aren't any sharp corners and that the robot isn't, dangerous, basically. But the big thing about the mechanical inspection also includes what's called the cost accounting worksheet or the bill of materials, as you might see it in the rules sometimes. And I will get into more detail about the cost accounting worksheet later. Electrical inspection takes a lot of time, right? There's a lot of electrical components. The batteries get inspected, the different components, whether you've got the breakers in the right place, whether you're using the correct wire gauge, whether you're using legal motors. And then, of course, there's also the dreaded continuity check, which is where they make sure that your electrical components don't ground to the robot chassis. Believe me, in our early days, that's one that we failed quite a bit. And it's a tough one to do. It's basically, you have to make sure that your electrical system is isolated from the chassis so that when people touch the robot, they're not going to get an electrical shock. Pneumatics is another important thing. If you have pneumatics on your robot, basically you're required to have an onboard compressor now. Make sure that all the gauges are in the correct configuration, air tanks, and whether the proper venting, whether it's emergency venting for safety, or the vent valve that you open to let off the air pressure, that all needs to be configured and accessible correctly. And then the last thing that gets done is the power on test. This is when your robot is actually powered on and enabled. That's when they actually test to see that your pneumatics are in the correct pressure. And if you don't know, it's 60 psi working pressure, 120 psi storage pressure. They make sure that your RSL works. That's the orange blinky light on the robot, if you don't know. And that has to work. It has to be solid, blinking when it's enabled and solid when it's not enabled, or it's the other way around. I don't know, one of the two. And then you also have to make sure that you're able to power off the robot. So you got to make sure that the main breaker works, and that when it is powered off, it is truly powered off. There is nothing running. If you really, really want to get into the details of all this, read Chapter 9 of the rules. Okay, this is really, really important, and you need to read the rules regularly. I don't know if anybody saw this, but update 15 came out today at around 5:30. Excuse me. Always read the updates, always read the rules, make sure that nothing that those updates would impact on your robot is going to bite you when it comes to inspection. Okay, read the rules, know what the rules are. The inspection checklist was made available last week. I highly, highly recommend that you download it and that you read it in advance, and even do mock inspections, like in your shop when there's no pressure. Have your students around and do a mock inspection. Go through the checklist and make sure that you pass everything before you even pack up and go to the event. This will save you a lot of grief. It will really save you a lot of grief. When it comes to the event, have the students talk to the inspector. Along the lines of what Nancy and Colton presented about pit judging, we treat inspection the same way, and it's totally and utterly up to the students to run the inspection. Really, the perfect inspection for me is the only thing I have to do is produce the cost accounting worksheet, and then sign the inspection sheet at the end. And if I don't have to do anything else, that's a great inspection. And that's ultimately our goal for every inspection. And in the end, remember your gracious professionalism, okay? The robot inspectors are going to point out things that they feel don't comply based on the checklist. Be gracious, talk to them, defend what you believe is correct. But in the end, it will be up to the lead robot inspector to decide whether or not you're in compliance or not. And when that decision is made, then you smile, walk away, and go fix the problem. Really, that and it's in your best interest, and it's in the best interest of everybody else at the competition. As I said, the inspector's job is to make sure that everybody in the end is going to be safe and that your robot will work. And that's what they're trying to ensure. All right, next slide. Okay, now we're gonna take a bit of a deep dive into bumpers. There is an entire section about bumpers in Chapter 9, which talks about the robot rules. This is section 9.5. Okay, your bumpers basically tell the audience what alliance you're on. They have to be either red or blue, not pink, not orange, not any other color, but blue and red. You should try to get as close to royal blue and whatever the correct shade of red is as you can. And they need to be switchable within 5 minutes. I mean, in some events, especially if there aren't a lot of teams, you may only have 10 minutes between matches, and you may have to change your bumpers. So you may be in a situation where you're going to have to change them quickly. And you can do that by designing them correctly. I'm going to talk in another slide about how 1325 does our bumpers, and how we conform with that. Some of the major rules that you need to be aware of: you have to make sure that the robot frame is covered at least 6 inches from every corner. And I mean, if you have a square robot, that's 4 corners. If you've got an octagonal robot, that's 8 corners. A corner is a corner is a corner. Okay, so they've got to be covered 6 inches. Okay. Also, your bumpers have to have proper support from the frame. The bumper cannot span a gap of more than 8 inches. And we also use that as a guideline. We like to try to make sure that our bumpers are secured at least every 8 inches as well, to make sure that they stay on. This year, the bumper envelope is 7.5 inches off the ground, so the top of your bumper can be no more than 7.5 inches off the ground. If you want, it can drag on the ground, although I wouldn't advise that. But your bumpers, they're 5 inches tall, and the top of the bumper can be 7.5 inches off the ground. Total weight of each set of bumpers, that's like one blue set or one red set, is 15 pounds. Okay, so that's weighed separately from your robot. Okay, the construction, the rules lay this out in great detail. 3/4 inch plywood backing. Okay, now and plywood is italicized there on purpose, because don't use MDF, don't use particle board, don't use anything else except 3/4 inch plywood. You will not get into trouble if you do. I've seen teams come to competitions using bumpers made out of MDF, and then all of a sudden they're in big trouble because they have to rebuild their bumpers, and that's never a good situation to be in. I've been there, believe me, it's not good. And then the bumpers need to be 5 inches in height. And then that plywood needs to be surrounded by 2.5 inch diameter pool noodles. Now the pool noodles can be solid or hollow, they can be round or star shaped, but they need to be 2.5 inches. Now you can, and this is 2.5 inches is nominal. I don't know if anybody goes to Canadian Tire and measures pool noodles, but I've done this sometimes, and I've noticed over the years that they may get a little thinner. I think these companies are trying to save a few extra pennies by not putting as much styrofoam in them. But it's 2.5 inches nominally. So in and around that, right, in and around that size will be fine. And make sure that even as you go around the corners that you maintain that 2.5 inches. Okay, so you got to make sure that your corners are covered 2.5 inches. You can see in the picture on the right, our bumper construction, you can see the plywood backing and the styrofoam. Before we cover it, what we do is we attach the pool noodles with just some pieces of masking tape. It helps keeps things in place before we wrap it. And you can tell we angle the corners, but those angles are 2.5 inches from the corner. Okay, that's perfectly legal. Covering a rugged, smooth cloth. In the rules, they mention 1000 D Cordura, which is basically the same material that they make knapsacks out of. We've used that material for years and have never had an issue with it. This year, we've gone and done something different. We're using number 4, a Dacron sailcloth this year. Because our team wanted something a little slipperier so we can kind of slide off other robots as we're getting defended. So we're trying that. We'll see how it goes. And then you can see the picture at the bottom. We have our bumper covered then with the sailcloth. The numbers you can see, they have to be visible from all sides. At minimum, 1/2 inch stroke, 4 inches high. Next slide, please. All right, so now some construction tips. This is stuff that we've kind of learned over the years. Make your bumpers like the wood about 1/4 inch longer than your frame perimeter, because you're always going to have bolts and rivets kind of sticking out from your frame perimeter, which is something that you kind of never take into account when you're catting up your robot or when you're doing your measurements. And also, you know, as you fold the fabric over, that also takes extra room as well. So make sure that your plywood backing is just a little longer than your frame. We usually find 1/4 inch works pretty well. As you saw in the pictures on the previous slide, what we do is we do the plywood backing first, and we join the plywood in the corners. We just use wood screws and kind of countersink them in, and then we also use wood glue. Some teams will use aluminum corner brackets to build their corners. We've done that in the past. But we've kind of gone to a different system where we put a sheet metal backing on top of the plywood after the cloth goes on, and that backing then has tabs on it, which we use to attach to the frame. Then when we use staples, hot glue, and stitching for the cover. We use a lot of staples. You know, invest in a staple gun. It's a good investment. Excuse me. And then with our system, because basically what we do is we screw on a sheet metal plate on the back that has tabs on it that's bent 90 degrees. We can attach and remove our bumpers from the top of the frame. So the top of the frame has holes in it all the way along the edge. And what we do is we put in what are called rivet nuts. And these are basically rivets, but they're threaded, right? So they're applied with a special tool. And once they're applied, they're kind of stick on there like a rivet, but then you can screw like a 1/4-20 or a 1032 bolt through it. And that way you can keep your bumper in place using the tabs. And we find that system works very well. And then we can get at the bumpers fairly easily, and we can usually swap out bumpers within about a minute or so, if we've got 2 students working on it. And the last piece of advice I would give is make sure that you've got red and blue colored duct tape at your competition in case you get a rip in your bumper, because you can be prevented from competing if the inspectors or the referee feels that your bumper's been compromised. So using duct tape of the correct color is a proper fix during competition for a bumper. Now, it won't be acceptable the next time when you go to your next competition. So, you know, in between competitions, you probably have to recover your bumper if you have rip centered or whatever. But at least for in competition, highly advised that you have red and blue duct tape for repair. All right, so we're going to go on now to the cost accounting worksheet. So the cost accounting worksheet, or as it's currently called in the rules, the bill of materials, like in past years it was called the cost accounting worksheet. Basically, why do the inspectors want to look at this? Well, the main reason they want to look at this is for fairness, right? They kind of want to level the field between teams that have a lot of resources and teams that don't. You know, some, especially some of the more established veteran teams are really good at costing, are really good at raising sponsorship money and costing things out, and can spend more money on their robots. So they're trying to level the playing field. The template, as I said, the new ones was made available today. It's in Chapter 10 of the rules in Rule I-6. You can get a link for it. Next slide. Okay, now cost accounting worksheet. Again, read the rules. There's an entire section on the rules about how to do the cost accounting worksheet. But some of the highlights here. The robot cannot exceed a value of $5,000 US. Now, all dollar figures are US in the cost accounting worksheet. So I know that a lot of our teams are spending in Canadian dollars, so you have to do the conversion. Any one individual part cannot exceed $500 US, and parts that are worth less than $5 US or less, and anything in the 2020 kit of parts are not counted in the cost accounting worksheet. And that includes stuff in the rookie kit, anything that you got in first choice, and any items that you bought with a kit of parts voucher. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's usually a good idea. Whoever does the purchasing on your team, I do the purchasing on Team 1325, so I have all the receipts. I know what we bought. I know what vouchers we used, we keep track of that in a spreadsheet. Now, in the end, the cost accounting worksheet is open to interpretation and opinion. And again, the lead robot inspector will make the final decision if there's a point of contention in your cost accounting worksheet. Next slide, please. So there's a very lengthy section, almost 2 pages, about what fair market value is, because you're supposed to put fair market value costs of all the components that are not exempt. In other words, the stuff that you have to account for. Okay. And they go into a fairly lengthy discussion about consumer off-the-shelf parts or COTS parts. Okay. And basically, the easy answer is that whatever the US dollar selling price is what you should put on the cost accounting worksheet. Now, a lot of teams in Ontario, and we're like this too. We buy stuff either from AndyMark through Studica or from Vex Pro. Vex Pro is based in Pickering, but again, they're both American suppliers. So an easy way to get the US dollar fair market value of some of the stuff that you bought from there would be to go to the US AndyMark site or the US Vex Pro site and just grab the cost from there. No one will argue with you if that's the price that you put on. Okay. Now the next thing, any parts that your students or mentors make, so like anything that you make in-house, you have to account for the cost of the material only. So you need to know how much you bought the aluminum for, or how much you bought the polycarbonate for, and how many square feet you used, so that you can come up with a reasonable cost for that material in the cost accounting worksheet. Now, for parts manufactured for you by a sponsor, this gets a little gray. So you have to be really diligent with this. You have to put down the cost of what it cost your sponsor to make it in US dollars, and that needs to include labor. Okay, so you need to have a discussion with your in-kind sponsors. 1325, we've got 5 in-kind sponsors now. So I have to talk to all these people to figure out, okay, what's your labor cost? How much did the material cost you? how much did you use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and make sure that ends up in the cost accounting worksheet. Now, you can, a little bit of a loophole in this rule is that if you happen to have a mentor on your team that works for one of your in-kind sponsors and makes the part at the in-kind sponsor for you, then the second point applies. So you only have to account for the cost of the material. So that's the interpretation. That's fairly clearly spelled out in the rules. So again, make sure that you've got all that in place well before your first competition. Next slide. Okay, so the bill of materials, like as I said, you can download the template from the rules. You have to present it to the robot inspector. The robot inspector will go over it. It's required to pass inspection. You may have to ask questions or explain the costing that you've put in the sheet. And in certain cases, you may need to show proof of where you got the part. So it's usually a good idea that whoever does your purchasing, that they have their receipts with them. And for me, for 1325, I have scanned copies of all the receipts of all the stuff that we purchased. So it'll be on my laptop, which I have on competition. And if I need to show anything, I can do that on my laptop. Okay, so last slide coming up here now. Some parting thoughts about robot inspection. It's a necessary part of FRC events. As I said, they're kind of two competing things going on here. Everybody wants to see your robot on the field, but at the same time, it needs to be safe and it needs to comply with the rules. It can be a confrontational and frustrating process, but it doesn't have to be. Go into it with an open mind, understand the findings, and accept them. And don't be afraid to ask for help from other teams or event staff or from the robot inspectors themselves. Ask why this won't comply and ask what you need to do to fix it. And don't forget your gracious professionalism. All right, and that's it. If there are any questions, I know I've kind of gone a little long, but I'd be happy to answer them.
Roland, one of the good points about this is something I heard at the June conference that we go to in the United States from one of the VPs of FIRST, and that is, in this particular case, to always assume good intentions. That is what you've been explaining that the robot inspectors do. They have the best of intentions, so just assume that as part of your gracious professionalism, that they're there to help. Are there any other questions at this point for either Roland or Team 1305 and Nancy and Colton? No, doesn't. Well, you are welcome to, if you do have questions, you're watching this on YouTube after the fact, please feel free to email if you do have any of them. So I'm going to switch screens once more, and we'll see that we don't have any questions just now. Again, this is another message from Mr. Hobbins, the regional director, looking for alumni who are interested in being part of the alumni crew, which is a brand new thing that we're piloting in Ontario. So if you are interested and you have some skills, you can contact Mr. Hobbins about that. And as Roland explained, he is volunteering at an event in Ottawa, the very first Carleton district event. And you'll find that many of the people involved in FIRST are tremendous volunteers. It's a volunteer-run organization. So one of the great things that you can do to give back, to thank all those mentors who helped you, is to mentor and volunteer at events. That's just very much what keeps FIRST going, both in Canada, the United States, and throughout the world. So once again, thank you to Team 1305 and Team 1325, to Nancy Dewar-Stenning, Colton, and Chaput, and to Roland Sing. We appreciate all you time you put in for all of this tonight. And comment from Hinkle Young, who's the lead robot inspector for the province. He says a lot of events are looking for inspectors and volunteers, so you can never have enough volunteers, I don't think. So always keep that in mind. It's a great networking thing too, I think, Roland, that you can meet a lot of people that can help you out if you're a young person as well.
Oh yeah, most definitely. These are great opportunities to talk to people who work in industry and who are professionals, and don't be afraid to talk to someone about what their job is and what they do and what things are like, and it might help inspire you.
Yeah, so great points right there. And that's open to students. You have to be a certain age for certain jobs, and alumni who are in university or who are finished university. So there's some age requirements for some of the positions. So if you're interested, please contact us and we can let you know what the rules are on that. So next week, on Tuesday, March 3rd, after the first of our districts is over, we have a webinar again at 7 p.m. on the State of the Union. I'm not sure, I assume that's something to do with some of the events and how they're progressing, and a youth council update. And I will be replaced by Sarah Sills, who's a brand new first senior mentor for Ontario, who does these regularly, and I've been subbing in. So if you do need to contact me, my email is similar to Sarah's. It's pkeenan@firstinspires.org, and I can answer any questions that you might have or direct you to somebody that might be able to answer them better than I can. Someone like Roland or Nancy or Colton or Hinkle, who's been chiming in throughout the webinar tonight. So once again, thank you, Roland. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Colton. Good luck at your
Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Good luck at your events this season, and I hope to see you soon. Good night,
Thanks
everybody.
so much.
All right, have a good evening, everyone.